and we are saying that order must stop revenge mission against IEBC commissioners. When the Supreme Court made this contemptuous ruling on the 2022 presidential election, we said we strongly disagreed, but accepted it in the interest of furthering the rule of law, stability, and healing of our nation. Since we made that concession, the Uda administration has proceeded on a path of impunity, witch hunt, and revenge. Their target has been the institutions and individuals the regime thinks did not dance enough to its tunes during the campaigns. The regime has also targeted those it believes it cannot trust to dance to the Uda's tune in 2027 elections. The Directorate of Criminal Investigations and Mr. George Kinoti were among the first victims. Now, the regime has trained its guns on the 4 IEBC commissioners, that the Deputy Chairperson, Mrs. Juliana Cherera, and Commissioners Francis Madenge, Irene Masit, and Justice Nyangaya, who expressed their reservations over the process that led to the declaration of William Ruto as president. One of William Ruto's grudge against George Kinoti and the DCI started way before the elections. Ruto appears to believe that the coming of the DCI, of the UDI regime, is a perfect mandate for him to punish the officers he long had a grudge against. We are here to say no.
According to Azimio leader Raila Odinga, President William Ruto has always had a grudge against former DCI boss, immediate former DCI boss, George Kinoti. And that is why we have seen what has unfolded happen. That's according to Raila Odinga. Now, the truth is, as a head of state, as a newly elected president, you'll always come into office with those grudges you have against people. Yeah, you have interacted, you did not like what they did, you had a problem with them, and now you're the head of state. But in my opinion, it is very important how you deal with these situations. You know, there was a great king called David, the greatest king the nation of Israel has ever had. And he had many grudges with people that he never dealt with while he was king. And what he did was that on his deathbed, he passed instructions on to his son, Solomon, and told him, ensure you deal with so and so because of this and that. It is in the Bible. You know, it is normal in this life. You'll always meet with those people who like you, and those people who don't like you. And those people who don't will never, ever like you. Yeah, they're your enemies and people you have grudges with. But what is most important is how you deal with the situation, how you deal with them. Especially when you find yourself in a position where you can deal with them. Yeah, maybe seek some sort of revenge. Although revenge is never a good idea. In fact, the good book tells us, vengeance belongs to the Lord. Yeah, leave the revenging to the Lord. Forgive your enemies, etc., etc. But on my show today, I want to deal with a very interesting, super fascinating case where a past president of Kenya dealt with a person he had a grudge with in a most interesting way. Former President Daniel Toroitich arap Moi had huge problems with a man who was very powerful in the Kiambu Mafia, indeed a nephew of President Jomo Kenyatta, a man called Dr. Njoroge Mungai, a qualified medical doctor, who at one point was a powerful Minister of Foreign Affairs. Now Njoroge Mungai was a mere Minister of Foreign Affairs, but in his mind, the Vice President of the Republic of Kenya, Daniel Toroitich arap Moi, was nothing. And therefore, on several occasions, when a foreign delegation from Kenya went out of the country to a conference or to negotiate something, Njoroge Mungai would take over as head of the delegation and carry out all the negotiations and tell Moi to shut up. And of course, Njoroge Mungai was untouchable. I mean, if your uncle is President of the Republic of Kenya, who can touch you? You're untouchable. Nobody can tell you anything. Apparently not even his vice president, your uncle's vice president. And even more painful for Moi, Njoroge Mungai's view was that Moi had a problem with English. He spoke English with this very heavy Kalenjin accent. And according to Njoroge Mungai, this gave Kenya a bad image abroad. Those Wazungus needed somebody who could speak polished English, like Njoroge Mungai, who got his university training in the United States, and of course was very used to dealing with Wazungus. And therefore Njoroge Mungai would take charge and put down Moi, even insult him. And Moi was just seated there, completely powerless as the second in command. Well, when Moi took over the presidency, something very interesting happened. Moi, out of great wisdom, overcame his emotions and forgave Njoroge Mungai, and even allowed Bwana Mungai to be chairman of KANU in those days, chairman of KANU Nairobi branch, and appointed Njoroge Mungai to various posts here and there. Moi repaid bad with good. Now just imagine for a moment, if you're Njoroge Mungai, how would you feel? This guy who I used to insult, you're the one who would be feeling very bad through the whole encounter. As you become KANU chairman, your boss is now Moi, the man whom to you did not exist, not too long ago. The man you used to put down at the least excuse is now your boss. I'm sure it was not easy for Bwana Njoroge Mungai. In my opinion, that decision was very wise by the late Moi. Because there's a saying, keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer. And that kind of approach has even saved people's lives many times. It is pure wisdom. But Moi was human. And there's somebody else Moi could never forgive. Oh yes. A man called James Mungai, a police officer, yet another relative of President Jomo Kenyatta. James Mungai was the provincial police boss for the Rift Valley, headquartered in those days in Nakuru, where President Jomo Kenyatta used to spend a lot of time. And James Mungai, apart from bullying Moi when Moi was vice president, did something that was unforgivable. When Moi came back from a foreign trip one day, Mungai claimed that Moi had brought back firearms to overthrow the government of Jomo Kenyatta, and therefore he subjected Moi to a strip search, the kind of search prisoners get, where they look even down there, if you get what I mean. It was so humiliating that Moi could not stand it and complained to Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, the president. And Jomo Kenyatta, in his wisdom, evaded this topic involving his relative. And he asked Moi a simple question. These police, they're under which ministry? Moi replied, Home Affairs. And then Jomo asked him, who is in charge of the Ministry of Home Affairs? It was Moi. And therefore Moi responded, me. And that was the end of that discussion. But then even after all that suffering, Bindu vichenjanga. And so one day President Jomo Kenyatta passed on very suddenly. Yeah. And as Moi was being sworn in at State House as interim president of the Republic of Kenya, guess where James Mungai was? He was in a vehicle speeding towards the Ethiopian border. He fled the country because he knew what he had done to the man who was now president of the Republic of Kenya. To cut a long story short, he later came back into the country and he was promptly imprisoned. But he came out, and I believe James Mungai is still alive. A few years ago, I saw him live. I was walking past a gate somewhere in Nyali, in Mombasa, and I heard the man's voice, and I saw him. You see, James Mungai went for some training with my late political lecturer. My political lecturer knew him very well, and he knew his habits, and the way the man used to behave, and his arrogance, etc., etc. And he had pointed him out to me on several occasions, and so I immediately recognized him. I even recognized his voice. My apologies for going back into history, but I believe this piece of information is very relevant just now, as we have a new administration which has come in. And of course, every man who comes into office has his enemies. Every man has his grudges, or woman who comes into office. And how you deal with them is very important because it affects the entire nation. Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha.